All right. Well, thanks again, Millie. Take it away.
Thank you again for having me, and good afternoon, ladies. Lots of familiar faces and a couple of people I don't know. So I'll get through the introductory part fairly quickly. I am Millie Gormley. I'm a certified financial planner, but I haven't always been. I actually started off with a radio broadcasting diploma from Mohawk College in Hamilton. Still making a little bit of use of that now as I have a podcast about women in financial planning. But I've worked in technology, I've worked in property management, I've been a real estate appraiser briefly. But my first real career was as an insurance claims adjuster, which is really fascinating work, but it can kind of be a little bit rough on the mental health. There's a lot of burnout involved because you only ever meet someone after something horrible has happened to them. You know, they've been in a car accident, their house is burned down, there's been a flood in their basement, or God forbid, a sewer backup, and they're not exactly in the best place in their lives. And your job as the adjuster is to administer the claim on behalf of the insurance company. So you're not really on their side either to that extent. You're there to help them work through it, but ultimately you represent the insurance company, and that can be a little bit, there can be conflict there sometimes. So as a result, I did kind of burn out a bit on that. And one day I was meeting a friend for lunch and I was bitching about my job, as one does. And he recruited me into working with the company that I am back again with now. So I became a financial planner in 2006. And the nice thing about what I do now is that whenever I meet with someone for the first time, wherever we're at, wherever, whatever your situation is, good, bad, or ugly, that's the solid ground that we're going to work from, or we'll build that solid ground, and then we're working up. My whole goal and my whole purpose is to make sure that my clients are better off after they meet with me than they were before. And I feel very strongly about, doing that to the best of my ability. Now I'm going to show you a slide, a screen, just the one. There we go. So I've been using this in networking meetings and presentations for a while now, because it really points out and shows how my industry has failed women. It's getting better, but generally speaking, my industry has not done a very good job of taking care of women's needs. It was a very traditional, and you've seen the pictures and you might have experienced this. If the advisor comes to your house, the husband and the advisor will sit down at the table and the wife will bring them tea, and then they will discuss things and all that. It's just that patriarchal, patronizing, don't worry your pretty little head over it, the boys will take care of you. Well, you know what? Sometimes there isn't a boy to take care of you, and you've got to take care of yourself. And these are some of the reasons why women's financial planning needs are actually quite a bit different from men's. We live longer. We have to take care of everybody, right? Either we're taking care of our parents or we're taking care of our kids. And that can restrict the amount of money that you can make and save for your own future if you're taking time off work to take care of other people. Women tend to be a little bit, and this is changing. This is one of those things that I've noticed is changing a lot. Women have tended to be a little bit more conservative in their investment choices, which means they're restricting their ability to make money in the long run, even though studies have shown that women are actually better at investing than men are. In a general sense, we do a better job of picking investments because we're not, ironically, considering that we're supposed to be the emotional gender, women are not generally driven by emotion so much when they're making investment decisions, and we don't tend to get all hung up in our egos. When we make a mistake, it's like, okay, let's cut our losses and move on. And some men are not really good at that. We don't earn as much money as men do. We still don't. Again, that's one of those things that is slowly and painfully improving over time. But the bottom line is, if you don't make as much, you don't work as long or work as much, it's going to be that much harder for you to save in the long term. And that's why it is so beyond essential that women actually need to have a plan. You cannot wing it and expect to do well. You just can't wing it. You've got to actually have a plan in order to get ahead in your financial future. So what exactly does that mean? Because we see a lot of talk and a lot of advertising out there about, you got to have a financial plan, but what exactly does that entail? So for me personally, my process with my clients centers around what I call the 3 C's. First, we get calm. You just calmly sit down and say, okay, what exactly is the deal? What have you got going on? What are you making? What are you spending? What have you saved? What is it invested in? What is your insurance situation? What's going on? So you kind of spread it all out on the table. And I've actually done this with clients. I had one client who literally had a garbage bag full of statements and documents and stuff that she did not know what to do with. And it had gotten to the point where she was completely overwhelmed. So she brought in this garbage bag of stuff and we spread it all out on the boardroom table at the office. And we went through it one by one. We shredded about 3/4 of it. And I was able to give her a good, clear picture of this is what your situation looks like. And that's the first step, is knowing where you're at. The next step is to get a plan in place that you can be comfortable following. So it's all well and good to say, okay, if you invest in something that has a average 10% return over X number of years, the math is simple enough in the grand scheme of things. But it's your ability to stick with the plan that's really going to determine whether or not you're going to be successful. Because if I put you into something that is really volatile, it's got a lot of potential for growth and you could do really well with it, but it's swinging all over the place and it's going up and down. And, one day it looks like the bottom is falling out and the next day it's like, that could be too stressful for you. And if you're going to be in something that you can't handle the stress of being in, eventually at some point you're going to bail out. And usually what happens is that people bail out at the worst possible time. When into 2022, the bottom kind of fell out of the market. It was a really uncomfortable position for a lot of people to be in. And some people did say, I can't do this anymore, I want out. Well, when you've done that, when the market is already down, you've basically locked in your losses and you've screwed yourself. But if you just can't handle being in there anymore, that's an investment you shouldn't have been in the first place. So my goal is to make sure that my clients have a plan that they can be comfortable with, whether the market's doing great or whether the market's doing crappy. We ride out those crappy times and we enjoy the good times. So your highs may not be as high, but your lows won't be as low. And sometimes that's what people need to get that equilibrium so that they can stick with a plan for the long term. And then it's having the confidence to just kind of say, okay, this is the plan. You do tweak as necessary though, because things change. You might get married, you might get divorced, you might have another kid, your kid might go off to school and then you got to pay for that. You might decide that you want to retire sooner, or you might be decided upon that you have to retire sooner because of illness or because family obligations come up. And how do we adjust your plan for all of those other things? A real financial plan is a living thing and it's a totally personal thing. So that's why I don't have a Facebook group where we talk about financial planning, and I don't do group coaching where we talk about your money and all that kind of thing. I do believe that we need to have more transparency about, our own numbers. We shouldn't be we shouldn't be ashamed or shy about sharing what we make or what we have or how we're doing. But the reality is a lot of people find talk about money to be highly personal and they want it to be very confidential. And that is totally reasonable and cool. That's totally fine. So any kind of financial planning I do is with a person one-on-one. So my weekly emails and my podcast are a source of information, but I always want to make that distinction between the stuff that you can get online, YouTube videos, TikTok, God forbid, all the stuff that you see out there. Look at it as information, but don't take it as advice. Don't take that as, this is what I should do because this person who's in a similar circumstance to me did that and it worked out for them. You don't know the whole story, and your story is probably going to be different in some small way. And that small way could be important enough that what worked for someone else isn't going to work for you. So it's always so important to have a plan that takes into account all the parts of your personal situation. So what else is involved in a real financial plan? It talks about your investments. That's sort of the thing that people click onto most because that's the simplest thing. That's what you see, right? It's what are you invested in? What is the purpose of that particular investment? What is your timeline for it? What is your risk tolerance for it? Investments generally lead into retirement planning. Retirement, the word retirement does not mean what it used to. It looks very different than it did 30 or 40 years ago. The idea that you would go to school, get a job, work at the same company for 30 years. They would give you a gold watch and a pension, and then you would sit on your porch and knit for a few years until you die. That just doesn't happen anymore. And it's probably not ever going to happen again in that same way that we've been conditioned to expect. So retirement looks different for different people. It might include part-time work. It might include creative things. It might include a lot of travel, especially in the early years. It might include, medical things that come up that you've got to deal with. It might include taking care of grandchildren, all kinds of things that are going to be unique to your personal situation. And so your finances have to be flexible. And I'm a big believer in a lot of flexibility when you're dealing with your financial plan, flexible enough to deal with things as they come up. Taxes are definitely a part of your financial plan. My idea is to pay the minimum amount of tax possible. So just enough to keep you out of jail. There is no reason to pay more tax than is necessary. So if you can structure your financial plan so that you're paying just what you owe, then that's perfect. That's really good. Insurance is something that isn't included. So if you've got a financial planner at a bank, many people don't know this, they are not in fact allowed to have an in-depth conversation with you about insurance because many years ago, banks started trying to sell insurance. The insurance companies went nuts. And now there is a legal separation between those two kind of divisions. So you can get an investment plan at a bank, and just a nice simple setup, and it could be perfectly fine, but it's not a full financial plan unless it includes provisions for what would happen if you died, right? There's your life insurance. What would happen if you got sick and you couldn't work? There's disability coverage. What would happen if you got sick and you needed money to do whatever with? That's critical illness insurance. That's one that people might not be as familiar with. Generally, that's Christine, cut me off when you have to if I'm going over time. Critical illness insurance is something that it's kind of like a life insurance policy, but you don't have to die. You just have to get really sick. So if you get cancer, have a heart attack, have a stroke, there's a list of occurrences that can trigger a critical illness policy. You would get a lump sum of money to do whatever you needed to do with, either pay off your mortgage. I've had clients use it for that. Go for extra treatment, take the kids to Disney World, whatever it is that would make your life easier in that time. That's that critical illness policy money is there for that. So insurance, you can see that can be a really huge part of a financial plan because it covers your butt if something goes horribly wrong. And then finally, I don't ever want my clients to die on a pile of money. I want you to enjoy your life. I want you to enjoy your retirement. I want you to spend it. But ideally, you don't want to put yourself in a position where your last check will bounce because you don't know when that's going to be. So you're going to have a buffer. You're going to have a little bit. There's going to be something left when you're no longer here. And the purpose of an estate plan is to make sure that what happens to that money is what you want to happen so that the government doesn't end up taking a bunch of it for taxes. There are some misconceptions out there about how much of an estate the government can get. And again, that's a very personalized thing depending on the type of accounts that you're holding and your tax situation in general, et cetera, so on and so forth. But estate planning up front can really put you in a much better position so that your heirs don't have a gigantic mess to clean up, and B, that they can get the maximum amount of benefit from the hard work that you've done to save up for your future. So that's what I do. So I talked about, I've got emails, I've got the podcast, this for information, it's not for advice. And the whole point of both of those things is to encourage people to contact and have a conversation one-on-one. So to that end, I always offer free initial consultations. We take a half an hour, we'll have a good chat about what your situation is and how, if I can help. And even if I can't help for whatever reason, because I have to be kind of a little bit particular about who I take on as a client because it's just me and a virtual assistant. So, but I'm always willing to talk to anybody about their finances and help get just a little bit of direction. If we can't work together, I can still provide you some value. So ladies, we deserve to take our future seriously and to plan as best as we can for it. It's going to come anyway, so you might as well do your best to be ready for it. And that's my spiel.
Thank you so much, Millie. That was amazing. Everybody's clapping right now. Yay.
Thank you.
I've got a question that Catherine left in the chat. I'm just going to stop the recording though before we get into the questions. And actually, we'll get to Catherine's question and then we'll go straight to the networking.